Well, welcome. Good afternoon. Good morning for those who are joining in from Western Australia. Thanks for jumping on tonight. Just a couple of housekeeping rules before we get into things, and I'm sure you're all very much used to this as you've been various states of online meetings for the last 18 months or so, but if you can just get yourself on mute, that's all great. Hey, look, I'm happy to have conversations or sort of questions all the way through, so you don't feel like you need to make use of the chat to not interrupt me. Go ahead and interrupt me, take yourself off mute and ask a question if it's at the top of your mind. I'll let you know whether I can answer it then or whether I'm going to get to that in my slide pack. And if you can, it'd be great if you can turn your cameras on. It's a lot more enjoyable for me to talk to a bunch of real faces rather than a bunch of white names on some black squares. So I very much appreciate if you do have the ability to just turn your camera on. That really helps me out. This session is, of course, as you would have seen, as part of the sign-up process, designed to give you a bit of an overview of what's changed as of the 2nd of January this year with the PMP exam. I'll talk a little bit about where we're at from an ATP, a training provider point of view as well, what's changed in that space, and also talk a little bit around, I guess, where we're at with the current, I guess, gap that exists between the captain certification and the PMP exam to give you a pretty holistic view of where we're at today and what's probably in store for you guys this year. The whole purpose is to be very clear about what has changed in the exam and the content of the exam to arm you guys with the ability to make decisions on whether or not you have the knowledge today to go forward and sit the exam, or whether or not you'd like to engage with someone to help you get that knowledge to go through and sit the exam. So there we go. So before we get into that, let me just sort of lay the groundwork for those who do not know me or Millpond, let me just sort of provide a few introductions just to make sure you are aware of, I guess, the platform we're working from here and I guess the experience and history we have as an organisation. So Millpond, your project, our passion. So we're all about essentially project management, either in the delivery space, delivering projects for our clients, in the consulting space, helping our clients do better, or in the training space, helping the knowledge in the profession grow as a wider group. We are based in Christchurch, but we do operate our training services across Asia Pacific, where we're constantly delivering. Pre-COVID, it was classroom courses here in New Zealand and in Australia, but post-COVID, it's been classroom courses here in New Zealand, as well as online offerings across Australia, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, parts of the Philippines as well. So it's, you know, when we are online, I guess the world's our oyster, and we've got aspirations to grow beyond what you see here. So what do we do? We do everything project management related, anything to do sort of half day to a 2-day introduction course in project management, through to what you guys are obviously mainly here to talk about, the PMP exam, the CAPM exam, the PMI ACP exam, and as of yesterday we've just launched our Discipline Agile offering as well, so we can talk more about that in due course. We do a lot in the tailored training space, so we do a lot of work with organisations, especially large organisations who have a large number of PMs, to help them understand their current processes, improve their current processes, and share that knowledge with their PMs to help get those results they need from their projects, and a bit of mentoring and coaching. And I myself and a colleague of mine also deliver an MBA paper as part of Otago University's online MBA, specifically around project management as well. So we teach in the academic domain, we teach in the professional domain as well, on top of our day job. So a bit more about me and what I do is, you know, I wear both hats. I'm a practitioner. I probably spend about 70% of my time delivering projects for clients, and about 30% of my time in the training space, helping people get their career goals and primarily their certifications. So I'm currently working for a large organisation based in New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, rolling out a big Dynamics 365 project. So that's set to keep me busy very much during the days. Also volunteer with the New Zealand chapter of PMI, so I'm the Christchurch branch chair. So if you'd like to have any sort of conversations around the volunteering angle of this and what your local branch can offer you in, you know, outside of a professional training space, more than happy to have those conversations as well. And obviously I'd need to disclose my conflict of interest being those two hats, so just to make sure you're aware of it, and I'll be sort of very much open and fair and honest around the different opportunities for you to help you get your certification. A bit more about me personally before we get into the crux of the detail. I'm a massive fan of DIY, so if anyone wants to talk about building things at home, this is me, the top of the picture there, building my house 10 years ago, and that bottom picture there is building my man cave / home office, which is what I'm delivering from today. This is one bay of that building. The house took me 1 year and 3 months to build. It's still standing despite all these earthquakes we've had in Christchurch, and the barn is sort of a 6-year labour of love. The reason why it took me from 1 year to build a whole house to 6 years to build a barn is because, for those in the room with children, know that your weekends disappear quite quickly. So I've got 3 girls who have their dad wrapped around their little fingers, and there are 3 little projects of my own in my weekends and evenings. Anything you see here tonight, or this afternoon, or this morning, depending on where you're calling from, you're more than welcome to reach out to me or give me a call, or we can set up a session just to go through, I guess, maybe some finer details with you independently based on, where you're at in your, I guess, certification cycle. Okay, so that's me as a person and Millpond as a company. So let's talk about what it means to be a training organisation in the sort of the new world of PMI going forward before we jump into the PMP certification. So for those who have been around PMI for some time, you would have been aware of the registered education provider model, which has now been sort of phased out. And as of this year, or late last year, they introduced this authorised training partner program. And this is PMI's response to some feedback they got from the market globally to do better and making sure they partner with the right organisations to deliver that basically high quality service that you guys deserve as clients, as organizations, as practitioners. So therefore, if you see this badge through any training provider, then you should have the confidence that you're getting a high quality service with materials which have been authored by PMI Global, with practice questions which have been authored by PMI Global, and with trainers who have actually been trained and approved by PMI Global. So above and beyond, I guess, to a new level where they've taken it to be compared to where they were at last year and years before with the old REP model. So where we lie in that, we are a ATP as of January this year, and we also are a chapter partner with PMI New Zealand as well as PMI Melbourne chapter. And looking to grow that, we are in talks with other chapters beyond those two to sort of also help offer them services to their members at discounted rates, which is a nice win-win. So what does it actually mean? Okay, beyond that sort of big stamp you see there, what does it actually mean in terms of what you'd experience from an applicant or a delegate on a course? Well, you get this big online portal full of all the presentation slides, and we're talking a huge number of slides here, so more than what you can sink your teeth into. And on top of that, you get this pretty hefty student guide. So the angle PMI have taken here is you should not need to look into any more text beyond what you get out of the service that we offer as an ATP. And this is also a course feedback system, which is very much encouraged to be involved in to ensure that PMI get feedback from yourselves around how the level of service that the ATP has provided to make sure that they are learning from that and feeding back to the ATP to make sure that they are maintaining that very high bar that PMI have set to be part of this program. There are 2 different tiers of an ATP as well, and we are a part of the premium tier, and what that means is you get, additional to all that, 200 official questions, and this is basically questions from the horse's mouth. PMI obviously designed the exam, and their volunteers, their staff have also gone and actually created 200 as close as you could possibly get exam questions for you as well. So there's nothing greater than this because as you'll see later on when it gets to sharing some tips and tricks, you want to do as many practice questions as you possibly can, and this is going to be worth gold in your level of preparation ahead of the actual exam to give you confidence that you're all over it in terms of the knowledge going into that. And finally, there's a whole bunch of other study aids supplementing those 2 points around the above, sort of nice little key spotlight videos to sort of look at the theory in a different light in a sort of more condensed manner, just to make sure you're over the content. You got some checklist activities, some knowledge checks, just to make sure that, hey, look, are you where you need to be in across the different domains that are involved in what you need to know to become a PMP certified practitioner. More about that in a second. And a whole bunch of free templates as well, which are given to us by PMI Global to use as a basis for absorbing risk registers or issues registers or project plans into your projects, which are free for you to use and consume going forward. It's a bit of a package there. And the final slide on us before we get to the PMP is this is not new to us. Okay, so we've been in and around the delivery space for the last 10 years, delivering either classroom training, in the last 5 years delivering virtual training. So virtual training is not new to us from COVID. This is something that it's been with us for some time, and we've got a pretty strong service and pretty good success rates. So that's just a bit of a background story to Millpond and I guess what we're looking to provide. Okay, any questions before I kick into the PMP exam? All good. Right, let's get into it. First, I'm going to tell you what hasn't changed. Make it nice and easy. So there we go. It's still the world's leading project management certification. There was a survey, and sorry, I forget the source, but in terms of all certifications, no matter what profession it is, it was in the top 5 globally, 2019 or 2020. So it's very much up there regardless of whether you're a project manager or not. Okay, so it's pretty well respected, pretty well known, and it's basically going from strength to strength. So that hasn't changed. And actually, because as a result of this change, it's going to help it go from strength to strength. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Over 1 million people worldwide have this now, spanning 200 countries. Add to that another 15 or so if you include territories. So there are obviously 6 chapters in Australia who will run with local chapters with the PMI. And it's becoming more and more common to see, especially large organizations, adopting the PMP certification as a eligibility criteria to become a senior project manager, a senior practicing project manager at an organization. So I was on a call with a global organization earlier this week who have mandated as part of their senior PM badge, their practitioners must get their PMP as one of, I think, 5 other measures to be able to get become eligible for that senior PM badge. It's becoming a lot more common in parts of India and China as well. So it's and it's very, very common to see this in a job advert saying would prefer or even must be PMP certified. Okay. What also hasn't changed, it's still based on this job task analysis. So there is a bit of a, I guess, misconception out there that the PMP exam is based on the Pinball guide. If you believe that's the case, that's incorrect. It is based on this job task analysis. So what that means, it's PMI every 5 to 7 years, canvass the globe, and they ask project managers, program managers, portfolio managers, and executives, hey, what do you need out of your project managers? And to put it simply, they boil the information down, compare it to what they did the last 5 to 7 years ago. And if there's a difference, they update the exam content outline, which means they update the exam. And that's what spawned this exam update as of the 2nd of January. Okay, so, going back to the Pinball guide, because that is more or less globally accepted as best practice, then you could assume, it's fair to assume that most formal project managers are abiding by the general framework presented to you in the Pinball guide. So it's definitely a good source of information, but not the ultimate source. So what PMI have done as part of this ATP program is taking all the sources and put it together into one training course. It's still Pearson VUE. So if you haven't heard of that, Pearson VUE is essentially an examination administration company. So PMI have partnered with these chaps to provide a facility, a mechanism for you to sit your courses. As of last year, you could now sit your PMP exam online, either at an examination centre, if you still want to go to a facility, or you could sit it at home, or you could sit it at your place of work, just as long as you got a decent machine and a solid internet connection. And a quiet space, then you're good to go. It's still possible to sit paper-based exams, but you've got to really justify why you need to sit paper-based as opposed to virtual. And haven't you heard of anyone in the last 18 months, I guess, achieve with the justification? So let me know if you want to talk more about that, and I can sort of tell you what people have done in the past there. Still valid for 3 years, and within that 3-year cycle, you still need to get your 60 PDUs. So if you're not aware of what a PDU is, a professional development unit, essentially 1 hour of effort in maintaining your knowledge or improving your knowledge and giving back to the profession. These are all things which allow you to keep your certification. So this is PMI's way of saying, hey, look, I'm not going to just give you a ticket to absorb and sit on for the rest of your life. I'm going to make sure that we're going to loan this to you, but to keep this, you need to stay relevant. So that's another sort of value add that the PMP certification has over others, where it tells yourself, your employer, your peers, that you're still relevant within the profession. So, 1 hour effort, if you sort of summarize what you're hearing today and go back to your colleagues and, present that as the latest and greatest of the PMP exam, then every hour of effort you go to build that presentation and every hour you deliver that presentation, that's a PDU. If you attend a conference, a webinar, if you read some materials, just by practicing as a project manager, you can claim these PDUs. If you mentoring, there's lots of volunteering, there's lots of ways to keep the certification. So if you've got any questions on that, happy to send you a bunch of information there. Okay, carrying on this theme, what hasn't also changed, still the 2 tiers of eligibility. If you have a 4-year degree or global equivalent, then you require essentially 3 years. About early last year, they actually emphasis on the month duration. So basically, when you enter your time for a project, you put the start month, you put the last month, and it works out how many months. So you need to have essentially 36 months of time spent as a project manager. And on top of that, you need to have your 35 hours of formal face-to-face, either physical or virtual, education and project management as well. Now, what they did sneak in there probably mid last year was if you already have your CAPM, that foregoes the need to have 35 hours of training, because PMI assume, well, if you already got your CAPM, you probably would likely went through training to begin with to get that, so therefore that already ticks that box for you. If you do not have a degree, so you essentially passed high school or have some sort of certification at high school level or university entrance level above that, then you require 5 years or 60 months of experience. And then you still need your 35 hours or your CAPM as well from the education point of view. And the good thing, the fees haven't changed as well. I mean, it would have been nice if the fees went down, but the fees haven't changed from what they were and have been for some time. If you're a PMI member, $405 US. And if you're a non-member, that's $555 US. So look, it makes sense to be a member. You pay $139 for your first year of PMI membership, and so you save $150 by doing that. So it makes 100% sense to become a member for the year you want to certify, and I'm telling you, it makes 100% sense to continue your membership going forward. There's lots of value in membership, and I can talk more about that in a later session if you like. Any questions before we move on to what has changed? You're waiting with bated breath. All right, this is the biggest change that PMI have made to the PMP exam since launched. Massive change to the exam domains. So if anyone in the room is familiar with the current version or previous versions of the Pinball guide, where it's very much been around those 5 domains being initiating a project, planning a project, executing a project, monitoring and controlling a project, and closing a project, followed by all the knowledge areas, integration, scope, time, cost, quality of resources, risks, comms, stakeholder, and procurement. I think I got them all. This is a massive change. It used to be really heavily focused on process. PMI are saying, no, that's not what practicing project managers need to focus on to be a PMP certified practitioner in today's world. Process is important, sure, but it's not everything. So what they're saying is that's now 50% of the exam content outline. The other 50% is made up of 2 portions, 42% people and 8% business environment. Now with the people process, essentially PMI is saying we need to be pretty good at working with people, at engaging people, at leading people, about motivating people, because at the end of the day, it's people who deliver our projects. It's not what tools we have, not what process we have, not what methodology or approach we have. It's all about the people. So how can we as an organization focus on getting people certified without having the strong emphasis on people? So emotional intelligence is what's really sort of pulled out here. Now, this is not all new content, even though it's rephrased or reformed differently. It's not new content. So if you are familiar with the current version and past versions of the Pinball guide, there was a section on stakeholder management. There was a section on communication management. There was a section on resource management. Okay, so we're pulling that out and injecting that with a whole bunch of other material to really emphasize that and sort of condensing those other process knowledge areas. And finally, the business environment, which I'll talk more about in detail in the coming slides, is more around being aware of, I guess, the organic beast that it is an organization and the environment in terms of what we're delivering within. It's understanding that things change. People have feelings, have needs, have politics, have objectives, and sometimes it's for or against your project. And being aware of change management, being aware of business value, being aware on business issues and how that project's going to solve those business issues, and tracking those benefits over time, measuring those benefits, and also your environmental constraints around just what your culture can and cannot do, what the culture of the organization or the country you're operating in, or it could even be beyond that in terms of the laws and the regulations and the policy related to your particular industry or your particular project. These make or break a project. These cause massive red flags, massive risks. So it's respecting those, having time for those, and planning for those as part of our preparation of delivering a project.
So can I ask a question here?
Yeah, Hamid.
So when you say you're referring to the current version, are you talking about Assume version 6 because 7 is not officially released? And my
Correct.
second question is, can you, for comparison, give us what was the previous exam domains? How does it change? Because you know what's changed, but what was previous?
Oh, yes. Okay. No, good question. I can simplify that. Or I can explain that. So what was the previous exam content outline is very much all the knowledge and processes you require to initiate a project, all the knowledge and processes you require to plan a project, execute a project, monitor and control a project, which is essentially making sure the plans meet the actuals, or if there's a difference, raise that change and get that validated. And finally, all the knowledge and tasks required to actually close the project. So it's very much split up and focused by the tasks required by the PM to get through those different, for lack of a better term, life cycle phases of a project. So instead of being this sort of, for again, lack of a better term, a clunky, a step-by-step approach to a theoretical view of walking through a project, they sort of flip that on its head and focus more around the values of what we need to focus on as PMs to ensure we bring the team along that ride, the project along that journey to get the outputs we require. So less concrete black and white theory and more practical, applicable, I guess, subject to base your certification on. Hopefully that answers your question. I can talk a bit more around PMBOK version 6 versus PMBOK version 7, which supplements these changes as well. There's a slide on that to come. And the other big thing they've made is a massive sort of growth around Agile. So again, for those familiar with PMBOK version 6, they came with the Agile Practice Guide as a free supplementary document at the end of the virtual PMBOK guide, or you could buy a add-on as well. PMI have gone to the point where saying, as authorized training partners with PMI, you are not allowed to teach PMP certification unless you yourself have agile experience. So they've gone to the point of saying practitioners need to know about agile, our trainers need to have experience in agile to be able to teach agile to our PMP applicants. So they are very much of the view that agile is now not just a mere solution to the software development or application development industry within IT. It is a lot broader than that. And it's very rare for projects these days to sit in either one camp being the sort of predictive, traditional waterfall approach to project management, or this other camp being sort of highly iterative, highly adaptive, agile view of project management. Most organizations, most projects sit somewhere in the middle. So you need to understand that spectrum, understand both those ends, and work out where you sit, and work out what tools, which techniques, which processes you could apply, which methodologies you could apply to your project based on what your project or your organization or your practitioners need to be able to get the outcomes you require. It's not a thing that sits in the corner that we're not familiar with anymore. PMI are very much putting the spotlight on it and saying that as practitioners worldwide, we need to have an understanding of Agile and then adopting what's relevant to our projects on that manner. So I mean, don't be sort of scared off by this. If anyone in the room is, say, in the construction industry, oh yeah, Agile, what is this crazy approach that IT people use? Don't worry about that. You know, we will take you through the crux of how Agile works, the sort of projects that Agile does work for versus where it doesn't work, and the more prescriptive approach does work, and the reason why that works better in some projects rather than others, or some industries rather than others. So don't feel like you need to have Agile experience, but we need to have the Agile experience to be able to share both sides of the coin. And just reality that most people sit on the spine of the coin, because the coin really ever falls on one side. Okay. The exam format has changed, all right? So again, just to sort of set the scene of what it's changed from, it used to be 200 questions over 4 hours. Now it is 180 questions over 3 hours and 50 minutes. All right, 10-minute saving. So 10 minutes saving and 20 question saving. It used to be purely multi-choice, i.e. A, B, C, or D. Now we have a lot of other options. Sure, the majority of the exam questions will still be multi-choice, but they're also now going to introduce multiple responses. So, you know, which two of the following? Or maybe which three of the following apply to the scenario, A, B, C, and or D. And you can choose, say, 1, 2, or 3 of those. matching. So you might remember, especially from your schooling days, where you sort of get some sort of English or maths test where you got a list on the left-hand side, A, B, C, D, and a list on the right-hand side, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's around sort of joining up A to 2 and B to 3 and 4 to 1 and no, I messed it up, 4 to D. You know what I mean? Drawing the lines between it, and the software application allows you to sort of drag and drop and make that as easy as possible. Hotspot, which is going to be quite interesting. Hotspots are images or diagrams or tables which you are asked to interpret. So you might, for argument's sake, get a budget line, a cost curve graph, and the question might ask you to interpret, at what point during our expenditure of our project did our earned value go above or below our planned value, or actual costs go below our earned value? What does that actually mean? And you'll be asked to identify the point on the curve at which that scenario actually happened. So we've got some example, I guess, mocked up questions that we can sort of share in that space in due course, and give people an appreciation of how that looks like in the exam before they actually get there. And finally, the old fill in the blank. So here's a sentence or two with a couple of keywords missing. Choose 2 of the keywords from A, B, C, and D to populate those blanks. 3 hours, 50 minutes, and there are a couple of breaks if you do sit the online exam. So the way this works is 180 questions, you have 3 60-question segments. So you almost could treat this as 3 mini exams. The reason why I say it's 3 mini exams, they're not mini, they're pretty big exams. The reason why I say there's 3 is because you do your first 60 questions, then you have your 10-minute break. Once you start your 10-minute break, you cannot go back and reopen that first chunk of the exam. Okay, you do your 10-minute break, then the next 60 questions, 10-minute break, next 60 questions. Okay, so the way it's to ensure you get a bit of a breather, because in the past you didn't necessarily get breaks, especially with an online exam. You had to be in the camera the entire time. But it's also to ensure that people are, I guess, not, how should I put this politically correctly, not abusing the system, and ensuring that they're not sort of disappearing out of the room, having a toilet break, but then obviously reviewing some of their questions and answers in some textbook in the next room while they come back. So be aware of that, because as soon as you start that first 10-minute break, you need to sort of close off and have review any sort of key questions you want to review before you enter that first break, and obviously the second break as well. And the advantage of the the computer-based exams over the paper-based exams is you do get those breaks. In the paper-based, basically that clock starts when you start the exam, and that clock keeps continuing. If you want to pop out to the have a break, get a bite to eat, or whatever it might be, that clock keeps ticking. Okay, and you're normally escorted from the room to, say, the bathroom or to the cafeteria to eat your sandwich or whatever it might be, and then escorted back. So you're sort of supervised during that excursion. And just a quick note on, if you are new to the computer-based exams and you haven't done that through a PMI certification or others, the way it works is you get, it's through your web browser, and you get some sort of software to sort of pre-install. It does a bit of check to make sure your internet connection, your system is going to be good to go. So you almost do like a pre-exam test about a week prior to your actual exam. And what you are asked to do is lift your web camera up and sort of walk around the room to make sure that there's nothing on the walls, there's nobody hiding underneath your desk, and your desk is all clean, just to make sure you are in an exam environment, to make sure it's all fair and above board. So there is an online proctor at the other end, usually a person based in the US, who talks to you, explains the rules, what you can and can't do, and there is software that's part of the monitoring system, which looks for your eyes, and if it cannot see your eyes for a period of so many seconds, then an alert will come up, and your proctor will come back on the audio and ask you to come back into the field of view. There was an applicant of ours who was sitting the exam, and they had their head on their desk like this, thinking hard about the question, and the camera couldn't see their eyes, and the person came on and said, like, can you please remove your hand from your forehead so we can see your eyes. So people are watching you, they don't interrupt you, you can't see them, so it's not a distraction for you, but just bear in mind that they might have a bunch of people in front of them all doing their exams, and they'll be able to tune into every call as and when required to be involved. Just a quick bit of advice from some recent experience earlier this year with one of our applicants. You, on the morning of your exam, you go through and settle up. They check, you do your final checks, do your room check, and then you're basically in exam mode, and then you've got like a 10-minute countdown to sort of get yourself ready before you hit the exam. once you're in that 10-minute countdown, that exam mode is live. So therefore the system's watching you, and if you leave the room. So what happened with this applicant is she popped off to have a quick bathroom break before starting the exam, and the application kicked her out because she was no longer visible. So just bear in mind, once you do get going, you are going, whether or not you've started the exam or not. So just treat it obviously with respect. You've got no issues. If you want to talk more about how that actually works, and some actually, if you want me to introduce you to some of our past students who've been through that process, more than happy to arrange that conversation.
Mike, got a question, Mike, from Vic.
Hello, Vic.
So do people need to go to exam centres, or can they do it from their homes?
It's up to you. You can do both. You can do it from your home, you can do it at a centre, or you can do it at your place of work if you want to. The only comment I'll say is if you're doing it at home, make sure you got no interruption. So if you've got, a partner or some kids, and the kids are liable to sort of bowl in the background, just be mindful of that, because that's pretty much a big no-no from PMI's point of view. So make sure you have a controlled environment. So whether you've got a door you can lock, or you can ask your partner to take the kids out for the day while you're, they've got no distractions, that's probably the best thing to do. Or whether you stay late at work and book a meeting room that you've got for those 3 hours, 50 minutes, where the lights aren't going to go out and the aircon's not going to stop working, you start to roast halfway through your exam. Just be mindful of these things, because 4 hours or 3 hours, 50 minutes is a long time. So just make sure you've got a decent power connection, decent internet connection, decent piece of hardware, and you're good to go. Which is why some people still choose to go to an exam centre, because they're responsible for all that. You rock up, you've only really got to concern yourself with finding a car park and getting there on time. But once you get in there, they look after you and get you through that process. You've obviously still got to prepare yourself. You bring the knowledge, you bring the toolkit into the exam, but very much you've got to, either option is fine. They'll be doing online exams for the last 18 months, and it's been really hassle-free as long as you follow the process. Cool, thanks, James. Thanks, Vic. All right, so Pinball version 7, where is it? When's it coming out? Nobody knows. So it was due out in Q4 2020, but look, understandably because of COVID, well, I assume because of COVID, there's been a few delays here. The last I saw, it was due out Q1 this year, but I've just had a look going on to this call here, ahead of this call, and I still can't find the actual due date. So the latest I saw was 2021. So they've dropped the queue, and it's watch this space. So hopefully the next 6 weeks, if it's onto their revised schedule, but if it's not, then it'll be sometime next year. There's this table here. Oh, by the way, I didn't say this at the start, but I'm more than happy to share these slides. So if you're taking notes or taking photos, that's cool. You can do that. But I can share this, and I'll also share the recording afterwards as well, so you get access to this whenever you like. No worries there. So here's a nice little table which is available on the pmi.org website, which I'll send you a link to, showing what the difference is between the 6th edition and the 7th edition. But basically, to summarize what that is here, it's again focus on value, being more applicable to more projects on a global scale, and being a little bit less process focused, a little bit less prescriptive. It wasn't that prescriptive in the past, but some people interpreted it being quite prescriptive, and they've sort of gone away, done extra measures to make it more, again, interpreted as a toolbox, right? This is a box of tools, so therefore, based on your particular problem, i.e. your project, and your particular environment, i.e. your organization, you choose which tools to use at which time based on this great experience you've built up over the last few years. So, if you're building a house, you're hammering a nail, you'd reach for your hammer because that's the right tool for the job. If you've got a whole bunch of holes to drill, you'd reach for your drill. Okay, so it's all around giving you the knowledge of, right, here is a pretty reliable toolbox. You pick and choose the tools based on your project. And that's the real intention of the Pinball Guide, and it has been that intention for a very, very long time. Excuse me, don't just think because it's an encyclopedia this thick that you need to use every single page on your project, because you'll spend more time doing the paperwork for the project rather than actually managing the project, which is our job. So just going back in terms of Pinball version 6 versus version 7, where does that leave CAPM? Because for those in the room who have gone through CAPM or are currently going towards CAPM, that is based purely on the contents of the Pinball Guide. Okay, so just to reiterate, PMP is based on this job task analysis, which is a global view of what people think and need from PMs today, whereas the CAPM exam is based purely on the Pinball Guide. Now, with these changes to the Pinball Guide, that brings the Pinball Guide more in line with the current exam content outline for the PMP exam. So we're in this bit of a dilemma where if you're going for your PMP between now and when Pinball version 7 comes out, my advice is do not read the Pinball guide, because it will not have the same level of focus required for you to be able to sit and achieve your PMP exam, which is the first time I've ever said that, because normally a good source of reference is the Pinball guide because they're very closely aligned. If you are going for your CAPM exam now, definitely read the version 6 Pinball guide. So what's going to happen, at some point this year, Pinball version 7 will be released. Then I'll be recommending to use that as a source of reference should you want more information as part of your lead up to the exam. But until then, I'm advising people to sort of hold off and just rely on the materials that your chosen training provider has given you as part of that preparation. Now, so what we used to do as an organization, we used to co-run a certification course and have CAPM people in the room and PMP people in the room. And that used to work quite well because it was great for CAPM applicants to be exposed to all these experienced project managers, and you sort of, you know, it's great for us to share our experiences and give you a whole bunch of content, but there's some pretty rich reward for being in a room for other project managers and hearing them share their knowledge as well. So that's something we are mindful of the next sort of say 6 months. We'd like to get some CAPM people on a room as well. And you know, I've read the content I've read an early draft of the new Pinball guide, and I've read obviously the content that we get with the current preparation for the PMP exam. And I'm pretty confident to say if you read the PMP prep material, that'll set you up pretty well for the CAPM exam. But until we've gone through that process, you know, I don't want to be 100% confident in saying that. So that's just a bit of a, I guess, a gap we have, which hasn't really existed really in the past, because the Pinball guide has gone through a massive change, which is following the massive change that the PMP exam has gone through.
Mike, just a quick question.
Yes, hello, Vic. Yep.
Hey, so the new exam, is it based on the Pinball Guide 7th edition, but this book is not out yet? Is that correct?
Yes, you could say that. I mean, yes, the Pinball guide is based on this job task analysis. Sorry, the PMP exam is based on the job task analysis, and you could assume that the PMI have also used this job task analysis to reformat the Pinball guide. So I guess to answer your question, there is a direct link between the knowledge required for the PMP exam and Pinball version 7.
Sorry, my question was, let's say if any candidate wants to sit for the exam, they submit their application and they're ready to go for the exam. In case if they need to refer to any book, which book they should be referring? Because 6 seems no use because
yes, correct.
The change, and the 7th, which is based, is not out yet. So what should they be referring? Is it the training material will be help? Apart from that, the book? Otherwise, they need to wait for the book if they just purely want to read the book. Is it correct?
No. Good, yeah, thanks, Vic. So yeah, there are options. So if you choose to go down the ATP route, then you'll be provided with a 400-page manual or document. Student guide is the official term, to give you everything you need to know to sit and pass that exam. So that's an option A. If you do not go down an ATP route and you want to do, say, some self-study, or again, a local chapter is looking to run a study group, then you could choose some of the third-party books, which have been around for some time. So you got Rita Mulcahy, who does a exam prep book, and I think she's up to version 13 or 11 now. So that was revised and released as of late last year. We've got a copy of that book, and we're reviewing that book along with also what PMI has given us to check what the differences are, or whether or not they do or preach the same. So there's the Rita's book. Andy Crow, I imagine Andy Crow's also released another book as well. So there are exam prep books out there which have been refreshed as part of the PMP exam changes as well. Cool. So is that all good, Vic? I think you're talking, but you're on mute. Oh, yeah, all good? Great.
All good.
Super. All right, so what I've got to show you, also as we start to wrap things up, is, okay, well, that's great at a high level, but let's talk about the actual content you need to absorb and the way it's delivered to prepare yourself for the ATP exam. You know, what does a classroom actually look like as it walks you through this theory? So there are 5 lessons. So let me just walk you through those 5 lessons, and I guess the themes of those lessons, to sort of give you a bit more of a concrete idea of the sorts of things you need to know ahead of the exam. So the first thing is lesson 1 is creating this high performing team. And this is deliberately lesson 1 because again, PMI want to emphasize the focus on the people over the project. Because once you get the right people on board and the right relationships formed, then we can then tackle this problem of the project. If we just jump straight into, like we do on a daily basis, all about the project and treat the people as a secondary thing, then you get off to a bit of a clunky and a bit of a slow start. So it's all about, the first thing we look at is building this team, how to build this team. And you're covering things that you may have covered in the past around, Tuckman's 5 stages of team development, things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we're not talking new stuff here, it's just putting more emphasis on this up front. Ground rules, so if you're familiar with, say, team charters from the agile point of view, or having this sort of conversations up front about what people want from each other, behaviors, values, these sorts of things will pop up there. Negotiating project agreements, again, agreements in terms of people coming on board, vendors coming on board, and agreements around what the project should deliver to the organization as well. Team members empowering, and this is very much taking a string out of the agile, I guess, mindset around servant leadership and understanding what your team needs to sort of be fed and watered to be able to grow, to be this high performing team. So that's when we get into training. Virtual teams, we are a global society, and if you weren't operating a virtual team prior to COVID, you'd most definitely are now, I imagine. So just being aware of the tools and the ways to make that work and the extra support you require up front to ensure you build those relationships in the virtual world, and just build this common understanding about, again, what CSU opportunity this project exists to deliver, how will it deliver it, what are the outcomes as a business, as an organization for our customers, or whatever it might be in terms of what success looks like and how it adds value going forward. Lesson 2. Okay, right, let's focus on the project now. Let's start this project. And you'd see you'll be familiar with a lot of terms here. So this is almost taking that old planning vertical, scope, time, cost, etc., and munging it into one day. So it's all around understanding different methodologies, what works in certain situations, what doesn't work, looking at what makes for good scope management, budget management, schedule management, quality management, integration of all these project planning activities to make sure we've got all of our bases covered. Governance, big portion of it, and look, to be pretty fair, the Pinball guide and the PMP exam prep in the past has been pretty light in governance. It hasn't had a lot of meat in the governance space, so it's good to see this pop in here because governance is such a massive role on our projects. And of course, just planning that project, the management of the project through the various different phases, whether you've got 3 phases, 5 phases, 10 phases, just understanding what it means to set up a phase, go through a phase, close a phase, start a new phase, and of course going into closure as well. So essentially, to sum this up, it's all about planning. We've got a plan now, let's go ahead and do the work. So let's talk about assessing and managing our risks. Again, executing the actual deliverables to make sure the deliverables all contribute to that business value that we said we'd deliver to at the beginning. Big thing around communications and stakeholder management there. Obviously creating the artifacts as well. Change management, big section on change management is covered in this space here, around where changes come from, how to manage and support those changes going forward, getting sign-off, track things over time, issues, and of course knowledge management, and ensure that we are building and giving back to the organization going forward. Lesson 4, keeping the team on track. So, you could almost substitute with this with the old monitoring controlling, but probably a little bit more focus, or not a little bit, a lot more focus on EQ rather than IQ. So this is where we're, again, making sure the team's working and it is in that high performing state, or getting it back to the high performing state as quickly as possible. Understanding how you need to, like I said before, feed and water them, making sure that we are removing obstacles and impediments, being that servant leader. So if you're running stand-ups, your job there is to sort of listen about what's slowing people down, what's distracting people, and step in there and address it. If conflict starts to occur, what's our role in that? Do we let them sort it out themselves first? At what stage do we step in and help iron things out? Collaboration with stakeholders, project team members, internal stakeholders to the business, external stakeholders, the various different tiers of engagement across that. Mentoring is in here as well. So mentoring hasn't really been called out explicitly too much in the past as well. So we're starting to see our roles as mentors in here as well as other people's roles as mentors, which is good to see. And there you go, there's the word emotional intelligence to promote team performance. So quite a lot of soft skills in around making sure we're on track. And finally, keeping the business in mind. Again, just sort of summarizing that point I made earlier around compliance, understanding the reason the project exists, and are we delivering to our benefits? Do we know what our current state is? Can we measure our benefits going forward? Can we measure that change in business value? Internal, external, environmental changes, because we know, as we all know, we're operating on shifting sands, and I guess the state of the organization when we start the project may not necessarily be the same state of the organization when we finish the project, and just being aware of those changes and making sure that our project's ready for those changes all the way through, which leads on to that next point there. And then finally, again, the old adage of always looking for improvement, to continue to improve, that sort of Kaizen approach, just making sure there's opportunities there for sharing feedback and applying these learnings to our current project rather than saving them up till the very, very end and potentially apply to a future project if and when the situation occurs. So that's the next level of layer down of detail in terms of, okay, what does that actually mean to be able to, build up my knowledge to sit and pass the exam. And obviously there's a bunch of material below these headings to give you some meat to get into. And finally, before I move on, I've got some tips for passing, but any sort of questions about any of those sort of key topics or areas that you see there? Super. Okay, that's just sort of put together a bit of a...
Mike.
Oh, hello, James.
Mike, sorry, me here, James here. Hi. There's a couple of questions in chat that are sort of from the previous section around Pinbox 7 and 6. There's quite a variety there, so up to you, but it might be worth mainly from Braden and Vic and Lee. So maybe touch base with them later. I've got to go.
Okay, thanks, James. What I'll do is I'll finish this tips section and then I'll pop into the chat and we can have a bit of a conversation and wrap things up. Hopefully we're good for timing. So I thought I'd put together a few sort of tips based on sort of the key messages we share with our students and with others, just to keep in mind as you lead up to your goal of achieving the exam. First thing is, how much do you remember? Like any exam, right? We need to read everything and apply our thinking to various different questions and make sure we go into the exam with a head full of information to be able to then get out onto the virtual page to be able to answer these questions. The sheer fact is, I should actually reference this research, you only recall 10% of what you read, 20% of what you hear. Great if you read it and hear it, 30%. Discuss it. Well, we're starting to get a bit richer here. We can recall 1 and 2 things we discuss. Experience at 80%, teach at 90%. So if you can be involved in an interactive conversation with a bunch of like-minded people, you get a pretty rich experience where there are exercises which forces you to think about the material you just heard, share it, and teach others on that concept as well. So I guess bear that in mind. Don't go into any training course, no matter what the subject is, and just sort of have this sort of passive ride. You don't get a huge amount out of it. It's more effort for you to prepare for the exam. So get in there, be interactive, share your stories, and it'll go a lot to help you out with your preparation for the exam. Know your learning style. So we all are different creatures, and we all have different preferences in terms of how we learn and what we like to learn. And for some of us, it might be some time between when we set our last exam. So we might have different or new ways of thinking, and that might also apply to the ways we approach our study as well. So if you've got a few moments, go to vark-learn.com and sit this sort of, it's like a 36 question, pretty quick survey, different scenarios to understand, where you naturally sit in sort of 1 or 2 of these camps, and whether you're a visual learner or a kinesthetic learner, etc. And they'll give you a page following that with tips and tricks of how to go about your study program. So yeah, worth its weight, I think. I mean, I did this when I was going for my CAPM exam, my PMP exam, just to make sure that, I guess, the approach I was using was right. We've had some people in class who listen to us talk and they sit there and do mind maps. They're basically doodling the entire day because they're quite visual, creative people. We've had other people who just go and write lists of notes because they're quite, I guess, systematical in their thinking. Some people watch our recordings or even listen to our recordings on the commute, on the train, or the way home, or whatever it might be. So you mix it up. The more ways you can tack it based on your way of thinking, the easier it will be for you. Make time. Look, it is a commitment. It is a sought after certification. It is a big certification. It's very popular, and PML want to make sure that the right people get it, and people who deserve to get it. So therefore, it is a challenge. It is a challenge, and don't, I guess, just assume that, oh yeah, I can do a couple of hours study and wing it. I mean, look, I've heard some weird and wonderful stories on that approach, but it's not a reliable, risk-free approach. So, you know, we're all project managers here. We sort of go into a training course on the understanding that our projects are all nice and calm and everything's in control, and then sort of 3 weeks later, our project rears its ugly head, and you got to sort of fight that fire. So just be mindful of that. We are mindful of that because we are practitioners as well. But make the time and have a conversation with, again, your partner, with your children if you have children, and say, look, you know, the next 5 weeks, or whatever it might be, I've got a goal. It's pretty important for me. Can I just sort of schedule some quiet time outside of hours? Even better, talk to your manager at work and see if you get some quiet time during hours, and just sort of again, make time for it. Collaborate. This sort of goes back to the point I mentioned before, share stories. And what's worked really, really well in the past is when we've had people from the same company all get together outside of our training sessions to all talk about things and share their views and stories and whatnot, or even summarize the content we've discussed with their peers. We constantly also set up little WhatsApp groups, which is sort of a nice little platform, you know, social media, which we use every day, for people to sort of just share stories and share questions, and people answer them with each other, and it's a great opportunity for learning and collaboration. So talk about it. You know, don't feel like you're on this own. You're on your own journey to get your certification. There are many people who've been through that journey in the past, and many people who are going through the journey with you. So yeah, get into it. Test yourself a lot. You know, there's a point, and we'll make it quite clear, and you'll understand when it's quite clear, where, okay, right, enough reading, enough researching, enough learning, let's get you into the exam space and just do exam after exam after exam, and really desensitize you to the exam, especially if you haven't been in that exam situation for some time. It's very unnormal for us as humans to sit still for 4 hours and do nothing but think about one particular thing. That's just not what we're made to do. So you want to build your, I guess, confidence up to get into that sort of mental state. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, after the end of 4 hours, your brain does feel like scrambled eggs. It is pretty intense, but you go out of there, nice thing with the virtual exam, you go out of there with a big confirmation then and there that all this effort over the last wee while has paid off, and you can sort of go home and celebrate with your significant other or your colleagues, and just sort of celebrate that milestone. And final key tip is just 6 steps to success. Reading question. Number 2, reread the question. You've got some time to pace yourself. You've got to be mindful of time, but make sure you don't misread a question. It's very, very easy to you're under a certain level of stress and anxiety in an exam to misread something. So just take your time, read it, even highlight. You can in the software, right click to highlight your keywords in the sentence to make sure you really understand what the key crux of this question is that PMI is asking you. Thirdly, eliminate the wrong answers. So at least you go from a 25% chance of being wrong to maybe 50-50 if you get rid of 2 answers. Oh, sorry. And if you're still unsure, maybe put them on a bit of a spectrum. What do you think is most right versus what's most wrong? Sometimes there are 2 right answers, but one is the more right answer, if that's good English. Maybe if that doesn't help, put them on an order of what's going to happen first versus what's going to happen last in a natural project life cycle, because, you know, you should do things in the normal order. And look, finally, have a guess. Do not leave any single question in the exam blank. Make sure you put at least an option down. If in doubt, go C has been my, you know, very common motto. I guess it works sometimes, but look, you get 25% chance with the sheer guess, and that's a heck of a lot more chance than what you get winning lotto. So just go for it, and you might win lotto. So that's really the crux of what I had to share with you. I'm 4 minutes early, but I can go through and go through those questions now. But if you are interested to jump on our next online course, it's starting 30th of March, which goes for 14 sessions over 12 weeks. Here's the different times based on the time zone. And if you are already underway with your studies, say in 2020 you went through to prepare for your PMP, and either you had your unsuccessful first attempt, or you just didn't get around to sitting the exam, and you'd rather have, instead of going through another 5-day course or a 14-week course or whatever it might be, you're interested in setting up a bit of a crash course and just focusing on the key areas of difference, please do let us know. We're getting a lot of inquiries from our past students on the need for this, and I'd rather do just a couple of big sessions on this with as many people as possible to get them all in a position to sit their exam as soon as possible. So hit us out through the email address below there, info@millpond, and we can sort of get you in on that course as we set it up. So look, hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you walked away with a bit of extra information that you didn't already have. More than happy to stick on the line, answer questions now. I'll go through the questions in the chat in a moment. And if you want to talk to me and set up a session following this, then let me know. So thanks very much for jumping in. Any questions verbally before I get into the chat window?
Yeah, Mike, thanks for the information session. I much appreciated. I think a lot of doubts not cleared. So thank you for putting up together.
Super.
Great information. Regarding your session that you planned 30th of March, 14 sessions. What happens if someone misses a couple of them or joins a bit late? Will there be any recorded version, or can
Absolutely. Yeah, no, all our sessions are recorded, and we make that available so they can use that for the study materials offline. So yeah, no dramas there.
And they will still get their 35 PDUs that they require.
Yeah, we work to make sure that that's not an issue, and either they get a bit of extra time from us, but it's more likely we can even look for opportunities in their past experience to get some education hours to get that 35-hour eligibility. So it hasn't been a concern for us yet.
I'm just mindful about the time, about 12 weeks. What happens if someone do want to take the training and sort of just within 6 weeks want to take exam? How do you advise for that? Is it worth waiting 12 weeks? Because in case if they don't want to wait 12 weeks.
Yeah, so we obviously have options on that. So we can either condense that schedule if there's enough interest to run a separate course to say do, if it's virtual, do some maybe 2 or 3 half days a week over a shorter time frame, or we can do a classroom course as well. So it's good to have this understanding from our clients, and if people have a certain goal to hit, then we sort of look to see if we can work that within our schedule, and we can sort of go from there.
All right. So if we need to organize on, let's say, group basis sessions, then I can contact you, and then we can work it out.
That's right. Essentially, I mean, the short answer is that if we can get enough numbers to make it work, then we'll make it work. So
sounds good. All right. Thanks, Mike. That's all.
Thanks, Vic. Any other comments from the group? Super. Okay, I'm going to just whip through these Q&A sessions, so just bear with me as I read these. If you need to shoot away, look, that's all okay. Thank you very much for joining us, and good to catch up with a few familiar faces and obviously meet a few more, so thank you for that. We cover the exam questions, that's great. We'll send out the slides and send out the recordings, so that's all good there. Well, we passed MILPOM PMP training material plus new exam content outline material from PMI for the PMP be enough for someone to successfully sit the exam before version 7 comes out? It really depends on how much you recall, and I guess, yeah, I mean, that's a very, very good question, and a very, very hard question until we have the first handful of people to go through. But I could honestly be guinea pigs in that sort of angle. Look, the content has changed. There are a few extra areas, so I'd probably recommend a bit of a targeted additional effort on top of the information that you've already got or already been exposed to, whether it's separate sessions through us, or whether it's just we can provide a whole bunch of material online through our online sources, as well as again, Rita's book as well. You could just buy the new version of Rita's book. So there's plenty of options there, and it just depends on how much time you've got. Obviously, if budget's a concern, and how soon you want to sit the exam. Yeah, potentially even a bit of a test for that is go through the 200 questions that we have based on the new exam content, see what the score is, and that could be a good measure of where you're currently at.
Sorry, Mark, just one question. The previous training or preparation material included sample exams. Is there anything that they've got?
Yeah, so we have 200, a brand new 200 question exam given us from PMI that's based and aligned to the new PMP exam. So we've got that. Now, a task which we have is to go through our previous sample questions that we gave past year students like yourself to adjust, remove the questions which aren't so relevant, and add in questions which are more relevant now based on our experience over the coming weeks and months, and also feedback from the students as well. So the best source of truth is from PMI, but again, Rita's book has some updated questions in there. To be honest, I'll be a little bit cautious about Rita's book. She released her book, or the company RMC released their book, I think November last year, before a lot of this PMI material was made public and made available. So I know they've done the due diligence. They're a pretty reputable company, but there is a chance that people read the book and things in an exam are slightly different. And until we get that feedback from people actually going through the process, I cannot confidently say that read the book, it'll be exactly what it's like in the exam, but it's still a good source.
So how can we get our hands on those questions?
I need to actually go through and look at the details on that, because essentially to have access to that material given to us by PMI, you now need to pay as students, which are bundled into our course fees, license fees. So just like I guess most commercial organizations, you are allowed to use the material if you own a license for a year. So think of it like an Office 365 subscription where you pay a year to have access to the material. So I think at this stage it's all or nothing. If you want to have access to the material, you need to go through an ADP, pay the subscription fee to be able to access that, which means you get a lot of it. I don't know whether or not that would force you to also go through a formal training course, or whether or not, because you're a past student, that covers that sort of gap there. So maybe Christy, if you can just take that in action on me, just to sort of take that back to PMI and see in your particular position, Gary, who's just come off a course last year, who wants a bit of a refresher, can we just give them access to materials without having to go through the tuition again? Don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I'll come back to you, Gary. Thank you. Apologies for misunderstanding. Are these 5 lessons from? Yes, more or less they are. So those 5 lessons are more aligned to Pinball version 7. I do not know whether or not they'll be formatted that way or framed that way within the book itself. I haven't actually seen the final release, so they might be case to case, but these 5 lessons have come from PMI as part of our ATP program. These 5 lessons have not come from the Pinball version 7. Okay, yep. Program portfolio management has a large focus on benefits management and governance. Indeed, it does. So yeah, it's really good to see PMI have absorbed some of this into the PMP exam, because it's such a big part of our roles. When comparing to the old format, how much has changed with the new format with respect to remembering various knowledge areas, inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs? So the whole concept of inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs, by and large, has gone away. There are some themes in there around, like a project charter would be obviously a common input output for all projects, but it's not framed with here's your processes, here's the inputs, here's the tools and techniques, here's the outputs. They've gone away from that structure, if you like. Thanks, Ian, for your comment. Was the costs in the slide at the beginning? What were the dollars again? Okay, so just summarize the costs. So there are different tiers of costs, right? So firstly, I'm going to say at the top, PMI membership, $139 US. Next tier down, for your exam fees, you've got PMP. If you're a member, it'll cost you $405 US. If you're not a member, it'll cost you $555 US. So it makes sense. Be a member, pay you $139 to then pay $405 for your PMP exam. Now, so that will basically get you a membership and get you into the exam room. If you want training on top of that, then there are other options. And just to sort of summarize Millpon's, this is not intended to be a marketing spiel, but just to summarize Millpon's offerings, we have online training and we have face-to-face classroom training. The only real difference is usually online is over more weeks and classroom is over condensed over less weeks. Classroom is a lot more interactive. We got a lot more story sharing happening from the attendees, which is fantastic. And Christy, who's on the call, as you can see there, myself and our other trainers do our very, very best to make the virtual delivery as interactive, but it's really ultimately up to the attendees themselves. There is a cost difference there. So it's about $1,800 for virtual training and about $3,000 for classroom delivery as well, just because there are higher costs involved for us as an organisation to deliver classroom training over virtual. So there is a classroom course coming up in Christchurch in March. There's a virtual course coming up anywhere in the world in March, and also we're doing a course in Western Australia in early April as well, and we're looking to tee up other classroom courses as demand dictates those over the coming months as well. Cool. Your cost New Zealand dollars, yes we do, but we do obviously invoice in Australian dollars if you are from Australia as well. So basically just take the exchange rate and convert it. So that's pretty good. And we do partner with the chapters. So if you're currently part of your New Zealand chapter or the Melbourne chapter, we give you a 10% discount. And then on top of that, if you are with a chapter who's not one of those two, then let us know. And we are in conversations with, or reaching out to Western Australia chapter, Adelaide chapter, Canberra chapter, Brisbane chapter, and Sydney chapter to see what we can do for their members as well to give them pretty good rates. So let us know, and we can let your chapter know that we've been talking to you, and they can get involved, and we can sort of tee this up. So look, our job, myself and Chris's job, we're in this. We do this to help you guys get certified. So we're pretty passionate practitioners, but also pretty passionate trainers, and it really sort of spins our wheels, and gives us a pretty good big smile when we get some pretty happy emails from our students after coming out of the exam saying, "Hey, look, passed. It was awesome. Thanks for your help." So that's really why we do what we do. Cool. Thanks, Lee. There we go. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for joining in, and I'm more than happy if you want to talk about things. I can stay on the line and we can have a bit more of a detailed conversation on your particular area. If not, that's all I've got to share. Unless, just Christy putting on the spot, is there anything else you'd like to share on this particular topic?
No, I think you've done a good job, Mike. I'm in a nice, noisy, happy cafe, so it's probably best I stay on mute.
Nice one. Thanks, Christy. All right. Thanks, team. Thanks for joining.